They said there were no predators left in the academy. Not anymore. Not in this age of light and reason, where every species had edited the hunger out of their blood. The xenobiology hall shimmered with proof, glowing pets that floated serenely, feathered creatures that chirped mathematical songs, beasts whose teeth had been replaced by smiles. It was supposed to be a celebration of control, the triumph of intellect over instinct. Then, the human arrived, carrying a cage that breathed. The room hushed even before he crossed the threshold. Unlike the other cadets, who hovered beside elegant grav slings and levitating biodomes, the human's entrance was slow, deliberate, and loud. Metal scraped ceramic tile with each step. The cage in his hands was clearly outdated. Tech steel bars bolted into a reinforced frame, mechanical latches, actual hinges. Primitive. It growled. The thing inside wasn't glowing or chirping. It wasn't purring in a dozen harmonics. It breathed in short, deep exhalations that pressed against the walls of its prison and echoed faintly through the floor. The growl wasn't menacing. It was a warning, the sound of potential energy barely held in place. Some students leaned back in their chairs. The human said nothing as he placed the cage on his table. His gloved hands released the grip slowly. The metal creaked. The dog inside shifted its weight, not pacing, not panicking, just watching. Silent, heavy, a presence. Professor Vethrin paused mid-lecture, all three ocular nodes focusing. "And what," he asked, with a voice made entirely of condescension, "do we have here?" The human straightened. "You said to bring a domesticated beast." The professor's lenses clicked in what might have been amusement. "Indeed. That is a beast. I assume it's sedated?" "No sedatives," the human said. "She's alert." The room began to murmur. Alien students leaned closer to their data tablets, flicking scans toward the cage. The readings came back disorganized. No neural modulator, no hormonal dampeners. No passive restraint field. A Glamari student in the back whispered to her neighbor, "That's not legal transport housing. It's archaic. Like from the pre-interface period. Are those bolts? Does it even lock properly?" Another cadet winced. "What kind of planet is Earth, if that counts as tame?" The human finally stepped aside. The light shifted, and the creature's face came into view. It was no larger than some of the biomechanical companions present, but the difference was immediate and total. A pit bull, short, wide frame, dense muscle, a head like a brick. One ear nicked with scar tissue. Its amber eyes tracked every movement with the stillness of something built not to intimidate but to act. Even its breathing had presence. "She looks feral," said a winged student from the Alari delegation. The human didn't blink. "She isn't." Professor Vethrin, who enjoyed theatrics far more than safety, approached the cage. "Well," he said, "let's see how tame she really is." The dog's eyes locked onto the movement, the change in posture, the shift in air current. It didn't lunge. Not yet, but it noticed. The professor extended one clawed hand toward the bars. "Let's be honest," he said to the class. "Civilization is defined by what we can touch without fear." The claw reached the threshold, and everything stopped. In less than a second, the cage shook with the force of an impact that sounded like a grenade going off under restraint. The pit bull launched. Teeth bared, eyes bright, body coiled in explosive motion. The steel bars rang like struck bells, chains tightened with metallic screams. The professor's hand yanked back. Nearly too late, the dog's jaws missed the wrist by a few centimeters, slamming into the bars with a force that rattled the display tables. Several students cried out. A floating orb creature detonated its own light field in panic. Someone ducked under their bench. A grav sling tipped, releasing a spherical herbivore that flopped and bounced against the floor, panicking. Before security drones could enter the room, the human spoke. One word. Down. Instant silence. The dog stopped moving so fast it looked like the frame had frozen. Muscles still trembled under the skin. Its chest rose and fell in heavy gasps. The moment stretched long enough for everyone to realize it hadn't been chained to the cage. It could have continued. It didn't. It lowered itself slowly to the floor, head down, nostrils flaring. The human stepped forward and crouched, placing a hand on its back. The contact was gentle, no force. "She stopped," he said, without looking up, "because I asked her to." Professor Vethrin was pale, or at least the Cathary equivalent. His left forelimb trembled as he pulled it in against his chest. That was an attack. No, said the human. That was a warning. One student, a soft-voiced Harani with gilled ears, whispered. It moved faster than I could process. I thought it teleported. The human looked around slowly. You all brought pets to prove you conquered instinct. I brought one that still has it but listens anyway. The silence that followed wasn't awe, it was recalibration. Every student in the room was mentally redrawing the lines of what domesticated actually meant. Vethrin finally stood again, his posture stiff. That's not domestication, that's barely contained danger. That's submission. No, said the human, his voice soft. That's trust, the kind you don't earn by clipping wings or removing fangs, the kind you have to build, with time, with consistency, with respect. He ran his hand gently along the dog's back. She relaxed more, muscles smoothing beneath skin. One slow tail thump echoed against the bottom of the cage. Professor Vethrin opened his mouth, then closed it again. Because the human was right. And no one wanted to say it. The class broke for recess 10 minutes later than scheduled. Most of the students didn't speak as they led their companions out of the hall. A few cast nervous glances toward the cage. The pit bull never moved, though her gaze followed them out with calm precision. Professor Vethrin lingered behind, staring at the bent bars. The human knelt, checking the bolts, then looked up. She could have broken through. I know, the professor said. But she didn't. I know. The human stood. You don't breed that kind of control, you build it. Vethrin looked down at his claw. A slight tremor remained in the joints. He didn't argue again. By the next day, everyone had heard. It didn't matter that the showcase was intended as a one-off assignment for Cadet Xenobiology Cohort C-17, or that Professor Vethrin had filed no formal incident report, or that the human cadet Matthew Cole had followed every rule. The story moved faster than any formal documentation ever could. The version that spread across the Academy's upper decks was simple. The human brought a predator to class, and it tried to eat the professor. The more accurate version, that the dog had lunged when threatened and immediately obeyed a single command, was harder for most cadets to accept. It required nuance, context, and the unsettling realization that obedience, when it came from something dangerous, was not the same as control. By midday, Matthew couldn't walk through a corridor without getting stared at. He ignored it, mostly. He had gone through the appropriate channels. The pit bull, named Sasha, was microchipped, cleared through the Academy's interspecies regulations, and had passed 3 temperament tests before arrival. The final one had even noted exceptional command response under high stimulus. None of that mattered anymore. Sasha rested quietly in the secure dorm habitat beside his bed, her head resting on her paws. She hadn't shown any signs of stress since the showcase. Her appetite was normal. Her breathing remained slow, relaxed. But Matthew had noticed the way she watched the door, just once or twice. The way her ears had lifted when a hover cart passed too closely. She was alert again. Not anxious, not reactive, just aware. He understood. She knew tension when it changed the air. Professor Vethrin resumed classes without addressing the incident directly. We are moving into behavioral mapping this week, he said on the 3rd day, voice smooth, tone carefully neutral. Your next assignment: identify the threshold between trained response and reflex inhibition in your companion species. Most students took this as a thinly veiled invitation to prove they could control their pets better than the human. Matthew said nothing. He was busy with the other part of the assignment, a private submission Vethrin had requested only from him. It wasn't punishment, though it might have been intended that way. He was to provide detailed logs of Sasha's behavioral conditioning, early history, trigger thresholds, correction methods, response times, and trust protocols. The logs he submitted were comprehensive. The instructor's eyes flicked quickly over the datapad as Matthew sat across from him in his office. These notes are thorough, Vethrin admitted. I'm impressed. Matthew didn't smile. I've had her since she was 4 months old. She came from a rescue facility in southern Michigan. Prior trauma unknown. But she passed basic temperament screening after 5 weeks of bonding. And the lunging? Was provoked by an invasive gesture, Matthew said without blinking. Your hand entered the cage, she warned. She stopped when told. The professor hesitated. You realize, he said carefully, that most of the students are now afraid of you? Matthew glanced at him. Are they? They see you as reckless, dangerous. Because my dog followed a command? Because she could have not followed it. Matthew leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. Is that what scares them? That a dangerous thing can choose not to be? Vetherin sat back in silence. 2 days later, another student asked to be excused from group habitat work with Matthew's team. I'm not comfortable, said the cadet, who had arrived from a floating continent world where predation had been fully removed from the ecosystem generations ago. His animal disturbs the equilibrium of our group. The Academy's legal department responded with a non-committal memo affirming the equal rights of interspecies companion handlers, provided safety regulations were observed. Still, the whispering didn't stop. Matthew took Sasha out only during designated walk hours. She remained on a short leash. His gloves had reinforced grips now, not because he needed them, but because others felt safer seeing them. When he passed cadets in the corridors, most of their companions whimpered or fled from Sasha's presence. One bioluminescent wraith beast flattened itself against the wall and stopped pulsing entirely when she walked past. Sasha ignored them. Always. It was the end of the second week when something finally shifted. Instructor Dale Niven, a retired xenobiopsychology expert from the Nathari system, had heard of the incident from second-hand accounts. She requested to see Sasha herself. I'd like to observe the command interface firsthand, she said, standing in the quad with a calm that most others no longer possess near Matthew. If that's all right. Sure, Matthew said, but not inside. They moved to the outer training field, a wide circular zone bordered by low walls and outfitted for high sensory tests. Dale watched silently as Matthew unclipped the leash and issued a basic sit command. Sasha sat. Dale approached. Not directly, not quickly. She walked at a 45-degree angle, gaze downward, posture neutral. Sasha watched her, but didn't move. Dale lifted a hand to mid-chest height. Still no response. Then she did something unexpected. She turned her back. Fully exposed, facing away, no defenses. Sasha got up, walked to her side, sat again. Dale turned slowly. She's not guarding, she said aloud. She's not anxious. No, Matthew agreed. She's curious. Matthew nodded. She knew I wasn't a threat. Matthew gave a small smile. She's good at reading people. Dale studied Sasha's eyes. They're afraid because she isn't dulled, she murmured. Because she's a mirror they don't want to look into. Then she turned to Matthew. How many corrections did it take to get her to this point? 2, Matthew said. She learns fast. She doesn't forget. Dale folded her arms. Most of them think obedience is about repetition. Pavlovian response. This is different. It's a relationship, Matthew said. That means it can break. That's why it matters. She nodded. Then, in a move that made his pulse jump, she raised her voice and clapped her hands together sharply once, loud. Sasha flinched. Briefly. Then she looked to Matthew. He gave no signal. He didn't need to. She was just checking in. That was enough. Dale took a step back. I'll be sending a formal recommendation to the ethics committee, she said quietly. Your entry shouldn't be feared. It should be studied. Matthew watched her go. When he turned back to Sasha, she was already looking up at him. He knelt, brushed her cheek, scratched under the chin. Good girl. Her tail wagged once. That night, Matthew reviewed the new comments added to the Academy's internal assignment portal. His project report had been opened more than 60 times. 2 students had tagged it with controversial. 1 had flagged it for emotional content violation, but the system had automatically rejected the claim. 1 anonymous comment had been left under the command analysis section. It's not the obedience that scares me, it's how much she wants to listen. I didn't think anything could want to obey. He sat with that for a long moment. Then he clicked the reply box. Obedience without fear isn't weakness, it's choice. He didn't press send. Just let it sit there. He looked over at the dog curled in the corner of the habitat unit, her scarred body warm under the glow lamp, eyes half shut, breathing even. She wasn't a symbol, she wasn't a threat. She was a dog. She had once been abandoned. Now she was loved. And because of that, she would die for him, not because she had to. Because she chose to. The xenobiology building had an unofficial nickname among the cadets, the gallery. That was what it had become, not a lab, not a learning space, but a curated exhibition of peace. Every room had its soft corners, its filtered light, its echo-absorbing floors, designed to calm even the most sensitive alien species. Inside these walls, students didn't talk about predators. They spoke of harmony, of behavioral suppression through enlightenment. That philosophy made what happened next all the more controversial. It began with a field simulation, part of the revised curriculum hastily implemented after the fallout from the dog incident. Professor Vetherin, still stiff in his left arm, announced it like a challenge. "The scenario is simple," he said, standing beneath the high dome of Observation Room 3. "You will demonstrate full environmental control of your companion species in an unpredictable stimulus field." Each cadet stood behind their containment zone. Their companions waited, hovering, or curling, or purring within their assigned perimeters. Matthew stood at the far end with Sasha, who sat calmly behind a static barrier. She wasn't leashed, but she was enclosed per regulation. The simulation began. Sonic distortions rolled in through hidden emitters, a mimic of native predator calls from 29 known planetary ecosystems. Visual triggers followed, flashing in rapid pulses along the floor. Vibration pulses, simulated pheromone bursts. It was, by design, sensory chaos. The test was meant to measure docility under stress, obedience under noise. Most of the alien companions struggled. One floated creature dimmed and slowly sank. Another began keening in ultrasonic patterns. A third tried to exit its containment zone, bouncing feebly against the wall. "Sasha?" She stood, looked at Matthew, ears lifted, tongue flicked out once. He gave a two-finger signal. "Sit." She did. Professor Vetherin paced the line, datapad in hand, logging each subject's reaction. When he reached Sasha, he stopped. "You're not correcting her," he said without looking up. "She doesn't need correction," Matthew replied. "She's reading me." Vetherin narrowed his eyes. "Or, she's suppressing instinct out of fear." Matthew crouched beside Sasha and rested his hand on her chest. "Are you afraid?" he asked gently. Sasha blinked. The professor turned to the control booth. "Increase auditory pressure by 20%. "Sir," one technician began. "Now." The hum of the chamber changed. The air thickened with low-frequency growl, simulations deep, primal pulses meant to trigger the brainstem. Sasha's breathing slowed. She stayed still. Her eyes flicked once toward Matthew. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. She trusted him. That was the signal. But the cadet next to them, a tall, pale-skinned Suvex named Laran, wasn't impressed. "This is still a threat species," he said, loud enough for the group to hear. "Just because it obeys doesn't mean it belongs here." Matthew said nothing. Laran sneered. "You think loyalty matters more than safety? That thing wouldn't last 2 seconds in a communal habitat. You have to dominate it just to make it sit still." Matthew rose slowly. "You want to test that theory?" Laran laughed. "You threatening me with your little death beast now?" "No," Matthew said calmly. "I'm offering you the leash." The entire room froze. Laran blinked. "What?" Matthew unclipped the reinforced tether from his belt and held it out. "You said she doesn't belong. Take the leash. Walker. You're serious." "She's not afraid of you. You're afraid of what it means if she listens to someone else." Laran hesitated. "And if she bites?" "She won't," Matthew said, "unless you deserve it." Professor Vetherin started to object, but Dale Niven had entered the room silently and now stood with arms crossed at the back. Let him try. The others shifted uneasily. This wasn't part of the scenario, but no one moved to stop it. Laran approached. Sasha stood the moment he neared. She wasn't aggressive. Her posture was alert. Her weight shifted to her back legs, not retreating, not preparing to spring. Just measuring. Laran held out the leash. Matthew didn't move. "Give her a reason to trust you." Laran clicked his tongue. "You don't train animals by asking." Sasha's head tilted. She didn't lower her gaze. He clipped the leash to her collar, gave a short tug. "Heel." She didn't move. Laran tried again, voice sharper. "Heel." Nothing. Matthew spoke, voice low but clear. "Respect isn't given, Laran, it's earned." The third time Laran pulled, Sasha took one step then growled. Not loud, not flashy, Just one soft, deep exhalation with meaning behind it. Laurent flinched. Matthew stepped forward. "Release the leash." "I'm not. Now." Laren let go. Sasha immediately walked back to Matthew and sat beside him, her body relaxed, tail thumping once against his boot. Dial Niven stepped into the circle. Simulation complete. Professor Vethrin, furious and silent, marked his datapad. Laran returned to his station, red-faced, hands trembling slightly. The rest of the class said nothing. Sasha's tail wagged again, just once. That evening, a notification landed in Matthew's inbox. Incident review, companion species simulation exercise. Instructor feedback. Subject demonstrates full inhibition under pressure, high obedience to threat ratio. Cadet demonstrates non-coercive control through earned rapport. Status. Green flagged for advanced interspecies interaction coursework. Underneath it, one private comment from Diel. Some of them are beginning to understand, some never will. But keep showing them what trust looks like when it's earned. Matthew closed the file. Sasha lay nearby, her muzzle resting on her front legs. Her breathing had evened again. He reached over and ran his hand along her spine. Her eyes stayed closed. He remembered the shelter she'd come from, the way she wouldn't take food unless the room was silent, the old bite mark on her side, the paperwork stamped, aggressive tendency limited placement. He remembered the first time she leaned against his leg without flinching. Trust had not been fast. It had been fragile, precious, earned again every day. Now, they watched each other's back. No force, no dominance. Just choice. And the choice, every time, was to stay. The lab's climate control system hummed at exactly 19.7 degrees Celsius. A deliberate number, supposedly the optimal temperature for neural clarity across the widest range of species. But, as the Xenobiology Research Wing ran its new series of diagnostic scans, the air in Observation Lab Theta 3 felt warmer than usual. "Again," said Dr. Israel Gannon, her translucent fingers hovering over the interface console. "Play back the neural sync data from the 15-second mark of the simulation. Overlay heart rate, pupil dilation, and limb tension from both subjects." The feed rewound, running the simulation in precise increments. Sasha's lunge toward the containment wall hadn't triggered alarms, but it had set off a flurry of biometric activity across the observation sensors. Not erratic, not hostile, controlled. Tightly controlled. "Pause there," Gannon said, narrowing her eyes. "Do you see it?" Her assistant, a lanky Vecran intern with 4 pupils and a sharp sense of timing, tilted his head. "The sync spike." Gannon nodded. "Perfect alignment between Cadet Cole's heart rate and the animals. That's not command response, that's feedback resonance." "But the dog has no interface node," the intern said. "No neural uplink, nothing synthetic." "Exactly." They ran the simulation 3 more times. Same result. Sasha didn't respond like the genetically engineered companions the Academy had become accustomed to. She didn't read commands from scent cues or electromuscular gestures. There were no programmed instinct suppressors. She simply watched Matthew. And when he tensed, so did she. When he exhaled, so did she. When he told her to stand down, her entire body obeyed, not out of conditioned paralysis, but because she wanted to. The lab didn't know what to do with that. Across campus, the ethics board met in a sealed hex room, surrounded by data panels and policy manifests. "This is no longer about the individual cadet," said board director Palin. "This is about precedent. If we allow full animal specimens without engineered fail-safes, we open ourselves to liability." "Cadet Cole's companion has caused no actual harm," countered Professor Dale Niven, who sat in on the board as a consulting behavioral scientist. "Her restraint has been demonstrated repeatedly, under stress conditions." "She nearly bit a staff member," someone else said. "No," Dale said calmly. "She stopped herself from doing that. That difference is precisely the point." The director folded his webbed hands. "And if next time she doesn't?" Dale paused before answering. "If any of your engineered companions glitched, if the neural modulator failed, or the mood-dampening node shorted, what then?" Silence. "They obey because we've taken their instincts away. But you've seen Sasha. You've all watched the footage. She hasn't been hollowed out. She's whole. And she listens anyway. You're asking us to trust a carnivore." I'm asking you to trust a relationship. That was more than they were used to being asked. 3 nights later, Matthew received a message. Request, voluntary neurological coherence study. Xenobehavioral Department seeks to scan neural and hormonal activity between Cadet Cole and subject. 217S, Sasha, in joint rest state. All procedures non-invasive. Consent required. He accepted. The study took place in a low-stimulus room, with pulse sensors embedded in the seating. Sasha curled at his side, head across his thigh. No commands were given. The machines observed. Heart rates adjusted within 17 seconds of contact. Breathing synchronized after 42. Cortisol levels in both subjects declined in parallel. At one point, Matthew dozed off for 6 minutes. During that time, Sasha remained motionless. Her eyes did not close, but her muscles relaxed to a near-sleep state. Brain activity showed a shift toward protective monitoring without rising aggression markers. She was resting, but ready. The researchers labeled the pattern mutual physiological attunement. No one could explain it. Alien companion species often formed bonds with their handlers, but those were designed to be soft, painless, programmed. The kind of affection that flickered under fluorescence and vanished under threat. This was something older, rougher, forged. They ran the study twice more. Same results. On the 3rd scan, Sasha lifted her head once in the middle of the session, not at a noise, not at a signal. Just to check if Matthew was still breathing. Word spread quietly. The pit bull was no longer just a curiosity. She was a case study. Not everyone approved. 2 cadets withdrew from the elective behavioral course in protest, citing irreconcilable differences with predatory normalization. A small campaign began on the Academy's public forum board, a call for companion uniformity standards. The petition only gathered 67 signatures, but it gathered attention. One post in particular sparked debate. If we're celebrating empathy, why does it scare us more when it comes from something that still has teeth? Below it, someone replied, because that kind of empathy is earned, and we haven't earned it. Back in his dorm, Matthew sat cross-legged on the floor, a training mat laid out across the tiles. Sasha lay on her side beside him, her tail slowly sweeping across the mat like a slow metronome. He held a treat between 2 fingers. Leave it, he said. She didn't move. He placed it on the floor, closer to her mouth. She looked up at him. He waited. 10 seconds. 30. A full minute. Then, take it. She ate, gently. When she finished, she pressed her head into his chest. He let out a breath and wrapped his arms around her shoulders. She was heavier than she looked. Denser. Solid in the way of something made to survive pain and keep going. She still had scars along her neck. Some from before, some from training. None were hidden. The Academy still hadn't decided what to do with her. There were no violations, no broken policies. Just discomfort, doubt, admiration that felt like fear. He scratched behind her ear. You don't owe them trust, he said quietly. But thanks for giving it anyway. Her tail thumped once against the floor. He didn't need anything more than that. The final test came in the form of an emergency. It wasn't planned, it wasn't simulated, it wasn't written into any syllabus. It began with a power failure. At 3:21 station time, the lower half of the xenobiology complex lost its environmental stabilization. Emergency shields kicked in, but the damage had already started. A maintenance drone had malfunctioned during a recalibration sequence and ruptured a nutrient tank inside Habitat Ring D. The released compound, harmless to most Academy lifeforms, acted like a panic stimulant in several of the bioengineered companion species. Within minutes, 3 normally docile quadrupeds broke through their enclosures. They weren't violent, they were terrified, and in that terror, they reverted. In the hallway outside, Dorm Sector 4, chaos surged. Sirens pulsed in slow amber, not red, not full lockdown, but close. Matthew was already awake. He'd been reviewing his next week's coursework, while Sasha slept curled near the foot of the bed. When the low-tone warning hit, her ears snapped forward before he even moved. He opened his mouth to give a verbal command, but she was already in motion, standing, alert, waiting for him. He grabbed his comm. Security? Static. Behavioral wing, emergency channel? More static. He checked the wall screen. Comms were down in this sector. Atmospheric filtration was fluctuating. Visual diagnostics showed two displaced companions loose in the corridor. One was a clawed herbivore twice Sasha's size. The other was a high-density floater, now pulsing hard enough to disrupt magnetics. The report said, "Uncontained distress." Matthew read it as, "No one's in control." He looked down. Sasha was watching him. He crouched. "Stay close. No engagement unless I say. You understand?" Sasha gave one slow blink. Her body stayed low, balanced, not braced for attack, just ready. They exited the dorm. The corridor lights flickered as a distortion pulse rolled past. Somewhere to the left, glass shattered. A companion someone's soft-spine jelly beast slithered out of its damaged tank and emitted a short burst of fear-triggered sonics. It wasn't meant to be aggressive, but the volume was enough to stagger Matthew briefly. Sasha didn't flinch. He touched his ear. Blood. Just a little. Pressure rupture. He'd had one before during training. It would ring for a few days, but heal on its own. As long as the drum hadn't fully torn, it didn't need intervention. He moved on. 20 meters ahead, the clawed herbivore was in a full panic spin, trying to claw its way through the environmental doors, which were locked down. Its handler stood against the wall, frozen, unsure whether approaching would help or result in being trampled. The animal's panic was making it dangerous. Sasha tensed. Matthew raised a hand. "Wait." He stepped forward first. Slowly, evenly. "Back off," the cadet handler called out. "You can't get close to it. It's in a pain loop." Matthew didn't answer. His body remained calm, voice steady. "Hey," he called to the animal. "Hey, it's okay." The creature reared once, slamming into the door. Sasha remained by his heel, tail low. Silent. Matthew raised his voice just slightly. "Look at me." The animal turned not from understanding, but from the shift in vibration. A new target. A new possible threat. It dropped to all fours and took a half step forward. Sasha growled. The sound stopped the hallway cold. It wasn't aggressive. It was precise, singular. It had weight. The herbivore halted. Not from fear, from recognition. The growl was old, untranslated, a warning written in bones. Matthew stepped between them. "Sasha," he said clearly, "stay." She sat. That part mattered more than anything else. The cadet who owned the panicked creature stared with wide, alien eyes. It backed off. Because it recognized something older than pain, Matthew said, and because she didn't escalate. Security arrived 90 seconds later. They took over, securing the animals and evacuating the area. But the footage spread. And this time, it was broadcast with context. Not the dog that lunged, but the one that stopped. Not, "Look at what the human brought," but "Look at how it listened." 3 days later, Professor Vethrin stood in front of the xenobiology hall. The showcase platform had been rebuilt. This time, there were no cages, no grav slings, no displays. Just cadets. Each was asked to speak briefly on what they had learned, not about their species' companions, but about their own assumptions. Matthew went last. He walked to the center with Sasha at his side, her leash clipped but loose. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't prepare a speech. He just said, "Domestication doesn't mean stripping away danger. It means building something stronger than fear." He looked at Sasha. "She's not perfect, neither am I, but we trust each other because we've proven it. Again and again. Thanks for watching." He crouched beside her and gave the signal. Sasha lay down, calm, at ease. "You all brought proof of what your worlds have designed. I brought proof of what mine survived." He stood. The room didn't cheer. It didn't need to. It understood. In the following term, the Academy quietly rewrote its policy guidelines. Domesticated species may retain original traits, provided demonstrable command compliance is present. Domestication is defined as a mutual behavioral agreement, not a full instinct erasure. A new module was added to the curriculum, adaptive trust building in legacy species. The first case study? Sasha. 1 month later, Matthew stood by the outbound shuttle port. A deployment awaited a xenodiplomatic outpost on a half-civilized moon, where companion species still assisted in fieldwork. The handler program had requested him by name. He looked down. Sasha sat beside his pack. "New ground," he said softly. "You ready?" She yawned and licked her nose. He smiled. Me too. The shuttle ramp lowered with a hiss. As he stepped aboard, Sasha, at his heel, no one stopped him. No one stared. No one flinched. They had learned what obedience meant. Not control. Not fear. But choice. And the promise that even the sharpest teeth could lie beneath the gentlest command, not because they were hidden, but because they were respected.